So what kind of talk are you expecting today? Whatever it is, you're not going to get it. Because I was contemplating, what would I talk about on this day? Because the world is talking about something very different. And so I decided to come with this title, Death, the Journey from the Many to the One. I think we've got this idea of death so ingrained in us that there is more fear that comes out of that. In fact, all fear stems from that. And I think that we have to really examine this idea of what that means. And so a couple things. We're driving up to Choctaw yesterday. And going there, one of my Easter rituals that I do every Easter is we listen to Jesus Christ Superstar. And so we've got Jesus Christ Superstar on just cranking, and my mind is going and going and going, and some new thoughts hit me. And here's one of them that hit me. You cannot die in the now. Think about that. In this now, you cannot die. You are alive right now. There is no death in the now. Now, even take that further. Think about the now when you've died. There's still no death because you're in the now. Whatever happens after death, you're in the now. So there is no death then in the now. It's only when we bring in the past and we expand and look out to the future that the possibility of death becomes relevant. So you start looking at all the great spiritual masters that have ever come onto the planet, and they all talk about meditation. And what's the purpose of meditation? To transcend life and come into the now. Now, I'm not talking about guided meditation. I'm talking about deep, silent meditation. When you get lost in that silence and the life becomes balanced and you're in that state of divine, past cannot exist. The future doesn't exist. You are one with everything in that moment. You are free of everything that could be holding you back in that moment. But in our humanness, we come out of the moment. It's natural to come out of the moment. The idea that you can be in the moment all the time, it's not real. That's what causes us garbage. That's what causes us all the crap that goes on in our minds, thinking we can have a one-sided life. So take the idea you cannot die in the now, and in the now, there's no fear. Think about that. If I am in the now, there's no past or future, is there anything to fear? Can't exist. Fear only exists when you're dragging the past in or you're forecasting the past into the future. But in the now, everything is fine. Where does all healing happen? In the now. Healing happens within the mind and the body when the mind comes into balance, into a state of telos. Telos is a state of pure balance. Telos is a state of oneness. It's seeing life through the third eye, not through the two eyes. The two eyes see the duality of life. They see the yin and the yang. But the one eye, the God eye, the divine eye, only sees perfect balance in everything. And isn't that interesting? Because everything is always in balance. Everything. If I have a magnet, there's a positive and a negative charge to the magnet. If I cut the magnet in half, guess what? There's still a positive and negative on each of the magnets. There isn't an event that happens that there's not a positive and a negative to it. We have become so blinded because we've been domesticated by society, domesticated by the past, that we think that we're here for a one-sided life. That's an impossible thing. Ours is to go in and out of the experience, returning to balance, building an awareness that allows us to keep experiencing greater and greater and greater and greater expressions of life. That's what we're here for. We're here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to experience life uniquely as only we can and as we desire to experience. But so many times we haven't taken the necessary steps to determine what is it I want to experience. We allow our parents to come in and say, well, you should do this. Or we allow the schools to say, well, you took a test. You would be a great engineer. I took that test. I should be an engineer. I'm not an engineer. See, those tests didn't get down to the very essence. And this is funny because I got a math scholarship to college. I guess I got I took the competitive test in Michigan and I was awarded a scholarship based on it. So apparently I have a very mathematical mind. Well, I bought into that I'm a highly analytical person. So where did my career go? My career went into a very analytical career. I was in financial planning and analysis at the corporate level of an insurance company. Then finally, toward the latter part of my career, I got into marketing. And the reason I got into marketing was the president at that time says, you've got all these people skills. You would be good in marketing. So he just moved me over without any qualifications. Made me over as an AVP, then I became a VP. Because what I found out later as I did the work, I am a heart-centered individual. I am personality-driven. I am out there to feel. I'm a feeler. I'm not an analyzer. Even though I've learned to analyze real well, I bought into the idea that men are analytical, women feel. That's not true. That's a role society has created that we allow ourselves to slip into instead of saying, who am I and what do I want? That's important. So I'm going to throw at you 5 different questions that if you answer these and you live these at the moment of that now when you move from this physical body into the non-physical, you'll move there easily. I think it's not in answering these questions that it's difficult to move. Because a lot of times we don't have that. I watched my mother go through her passing. It was not an easy transition for my mother. I also watched my father go through it. He took a long time to go through it. A long time to go through it. Because he didn't answer these questions. He hadn't lived these questions. So the first one is, do you have the courage to live authentically and not subordinate yourself to the expectations of others? Do you have the courage to know, to figure out who you are? To understand who you are, to live who you are, and not give up who you are for what others want you to be. Do you have that courage? And if you haven't in the past, are you willing to start now? Because when you die, that's one of the things that's going to come into your mind. Was I me? Did I live my life fully as I wanted to? Not did I please my mother? I can remember so clearly when I was on the path to being a minister, my mother would say to me, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you can get up and talk like that to people? Why do you think people would listen? And then all of a sudden she came to several services. She came to my ordination and she saw things differently. She finally said, I was wrong. I'm sorry I said that. My father never came to a service, never came to an ordination. The first time he ever heard me speak in this fashion was when I did my mother's memorial. And he was in tears because he got to see my authentic self come out and celebrate the life of my mother as only I could. I don't do things the way ministers do it. I do things the way God within me desires to do it. That's a heart-centered life. A heart-centered life is living authentic. Understanding that being authentic, you have an intention behind everything you do. And it's that intention behind everything that gives life its meaning. So are you willing to be authentic? Do you work, there should be an extra O in there. Do you work too hard? I'm going to tell you what. I was taught that the reward for good work is more work. Now, if you're a kid, there are a few young people in here, and your parent says, you know, if you work hard, we're going to give you more work to do. The kid goes, oh, crap. I don't think I'm going to do a lot of work, because if I do more, I'm going to stretch it out. So when I was in college in the summers, because I lived in Dearborn, Michigan, they had this thing called Camp Dearborn, which was about 40 minutes outside of Dearborn. It was out in the country, and they had a whole thing. It was 6 man-made lakes. It was an outdoor rec area. You could have tent city. There was a trailer city. They had a boat, one lake with paddle boats, a lake with ski boats. They had a huge beach. It was the place to go. I worked there. I loved working there. And because we were employed by the city of Dearborn, the city workers who were in charge taught us how to do the least amount possible in a given day, and if we didn't do that, it would make them look bad, and that would not be reflected good on us because they would get even with us. I remember, and so we learned to milk the dog, so to speak. As I've gotten older, what I realized is that when I'm doing what I love, how can that be hard work? When I'm working a 12, 14, 15-hour day and I'm doing what I love, is that work or am I doing what I love? See, the question is so many times we're doing things we don't love, or we haven't linked what we're doing to what we love. And so if we're just doing a job for doing a job because we're taught we're having a job, we're going to be absolutely miserable. But if you're doing what you love, that's the greatest thing you can do. So we've got some teenagers and younger people in the room here. My challenge to you is figure out what you love. And then once you figure out what you love, how can I give what I love to the world where I serve more people? The more people I serve doing what I love, the more abundance will come to you. Because people naturally, if you're being of service to them, will give back to you. Because what is money? Energy. What is service? Energy. It's an exchange of energy that goes. The more you give of what you love, the more money comes back. But if you're not doing it with love, it's going to be a miserable giving and receiving. There'll be conditions all over it. And conditions, that's not a way to live. Don't work too hard. Work doing what you love. Do you have the courage and do you express your true feelings? Or are you masking them? Are you hiding them because you were told not to express your feelings? True feelings are feelings associated with being authentic. A feeling that's not true is when you're not being authentic, and that feeling in that moment is to get you to be authentic. Do you see that? Our feelings are about bringing us back to balance. They're bringing us back to tell us that we have a natural guidance system within us that wants to evolve. And when we come back into the state of balance, into the state of talents, we then, when we master that, we move up to another level of awareness and we get to experience life in a whole bigger way. And we're going to have the contrast again. And you see, don't think it's going to end. It doesn't. But it's a wild ride, and that's what we're here for. Remember when you were a baby, a young kid, and you went and they had the baby part of Six Flags or of Disney World, and they had the little bitty roller coasters. And then as you got a little older, there were the bigger roller coasters. And then when you got to an adult, the big ones were available. How many of you are scared to go on the big roller coaster? Gene, raise your hand. My wife is terrified of the big roller coasters. She hates them. She's not terrified. She hates them. Why would you hate them if you didn't have fear? And isn't terrified and fear going together? So wife speaks out of both sides of her mouth. So we had a ministers' gathering in Los Angeles about 6 years ago, and we had an afternoon and evening free. I'm an instigator. What did I do? I got 3 other ministers, And we went to Disney World, and our whole goal was to ride every roller coaster 3 or 4 times. And we would get in the front seat of the roller coaster. We would put our hands in the air, and I've got a picture of us doing this, and we screamed like little children. Do you know there's no better therapy in the world? When you're done of 8 hours of riding the roller coaster, screaming, hallelujah, Jesus. That's like a rebirth, a baptism. So the question you ask is, are you experiencing your true feelings? Or are they false feelings? Are they feelings that are keeping you locked where you are? Remember, your feelings have a purpose. They're telling you to come back to balance. But if you don't listen to your feelings, you keep having the same ones over, you're not listening. Next, do you stay in touch with your loved ones? Because if I told you today you had 24 hours to live, the one thing I know that each person here would do is they would find the people they cared for and they would say to them, I love you. Why wait until that last moment? Why not do that every day? Blake, look at your mother. Tell her you love her. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? A mother and a son in love. Now, Bonnie, turn to your sister Colleen. This is more difficult. Say, Colleen, I love you. Colleen, now tell your sister that. Oh, she turned away. Oh, well, enough with the Larson sisters over there. Okay, the most important thing is tell the people you love them. Remember, love is not a romantic thing. One of the most touching things that I've ever been a part of was walking through my friend, Brother Chi Sing, go through death. And I watched this beautiful soul. Brother Chi Sing was a Buddhist monk, a gay Buddhist monk. I didn't know there was such a thing, but he corrected me all the time. And he went all over the world testing modalities to heal himself of cancer. And it didn't work, and he was in hospice, and he was in a hospital in Richardson. And I remember walking into this ward, and it was dead silence. It was spooky. And I walked into his room, and Chi Sing at this time, he was a thin man to start with, but he was real thin. He was in the last days of his life. And I walked over, and I took his hand, and I said, how are you doing? And he just looked at me and he said, I don't want to die here, Lee. This is not how I want to leave the planet. I said, what do you want? He says, I want to die with my family. I want to die in my family's home. And I said, I'll make it happen. And then I did my prayer work with him and I left. And I walked out and I saw in the waiting room was his older brother, who was the sort of running the family at that time. The parents were older. And I walked over and I sat down, and he knew who I was. We'd met once before. And I said, your brother asked me to help him with something, and I think you're the only person that can make this happen. And I said, your brother wants to go home and die. And his brother said, no, we just got him here. This is where he's going to die. And I said, you don't understand. Your brother really wants to die at home. And he looked at me, and I started crying, and he started crying. And he says, I'll just see what I can do. And then I said to him, has your mother told Chi Sing that she loves him? Yes. I said, has your mother told Chi Sing that she accepts him? And he said, no, because his mother was an evangelical Christian. Chi Sing is a Buddhist monk and gay. Do you see the difference? And I looked at him and said, get your mother to accept him. It will cause peace in the family. The miraculous thing of Facebook, comes into play here, because that night was a picture posted on Facebook of Chi Sing in a bed in the middle of his family's dining or living room with his family around him. And the next morning he passed. For me, that's about being in touch with your loved ones. I love Brother Chi Sing, so he asked me to be his loving brother and to help love be in his family. That's what it means. Are you open to doing that when your time comes? It may not be in that way, but there's a way that you can be bringing people together and seeing the truth. Well, the question here is, do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel right now, if you were to make that move, have you lived everything you wanted to live in your life? Have you fully taken your gift out and given it? If you were here last week, you heard that I have committed the next 15 years to building the spiritual center. I've committed to taking Agape to its 25th anniversary as a senior minister and building it and leaving the legacy behind at that point, where we are a community. We have our home. We have other ministers. We have a much bigger community. We're worldwide. At our board meeting, I was asked, what is the vision for Agape? Right now, my 5-year vision is to have this room filled with 300 people and have a first service filled with about 150 people in that room. At the end of the year, I want to have at least 10,000 people subscribing to our YouTube channel. Next year, 50,000. I have this tremendous goal that this teaching can go out into the world. I also have a goal of taking people on sacred journeys around the world because I love doing travel to exotic places and finding out how are they different and how are we alike. My vision is clear to me now because I started asking questions that were bigger than what I was. I had to go beyond what I could believe and go into what I wanted. Now that I'm living that, what's happening to me is I'm giving up things that no longer serve me. I'm trying to find ways to give up driving time. Because I realize I'm driving a lot coming from Highland Village to Frisco 4 or 5 days a week. How can I do this more effectively? You know, with technology, we can do this. With Zoom and Skype and all these things, we can have intimate relationships on the phone, can't we? So the question you ask is, am I living my most fulfilled life? And how can I fulfill it even more? Those are good questions to ask. Here's a really good one. Are you ready to be one? Remember, we were born and the journey was from the one to the many. Once we got individualized, guess what's happening? There's a DNA, a natural tendency within us that desires to be in the one. Now, in our humanness, we're going to stay in the diversity. But there are moments where we reconnect. Those moments we reconnect, it's like we're an electric car. At night, what do you have to do with an electric car? You have to take the thing, you have to plug it in, and overnight it gets juiced. So when you're doing your deep meditation, you're doing your acts of kindness, you're living in awareness, you're doing whatever your spiritual is, that's about recharging you so that you can go back into duality. And when you recharge, it's easier to be in the world. Because the world is an interesting place. The world is full of contrast. To expect the world not to be full of contrast is going to cause you severe depression. You know, did you hear what happened yesterday in Sri Lanka? 200 people died. I think 3 different Catholic churches were bombed. 500 or more people injured. We live in a world that's just as violent as it was before. We're just as divided as we've always been. There are levels of people whose consciousness is rising, but I do believe that it's not the majority. Because when I look at the majority, I don't know how many people are truly aware. I don't know how many people are looking to be more. I think we all find it in our own time. It may be in this life or another life or another life or another life. I don't know. But I know if you're here today, you're seeking to be a more evolved and more aware you. But to do that, it's going to take a lot of great internal strength. You're going to have to be willing to step into your big boy and big girl pants, and you're going to have to walk out into the world and not give a hoot what other people say, But be authentic, be real, live your fulfilled life, do it with joy, do it with love, give everything you got, and never settle for less than your best in that moment. When you've done that, you have rebirthed yourself into a divine expression of the infinite, and now your life is going to have a meaning bigger than you could ever imagine before. Bigger than before, but it's with you. There's no power outside of you that can do this for you. You have been given all the gifts. You've been given the power to think, the greatest gift in the world. You've been given the gift to feel, the greatest other gift in the world. You blend the thinking and the feeling together, and you consciously use that, and you create your perfect life. And in that moment when you die, you realize that you're not dying at all, but you're rebirthing yourself into the one. And it becomes an easy, joyful, and peaceful movement. But remember, it's your choice. It's always your choice, and it's always been your choice. Happy Easter. Let's pray. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask that you go to our website, agapecsl.com. Once there, click on the donate button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. Or if you would like, text your gift by simply dialing 972-532-6976. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to you in the world. I would ask that if you like this message, to please subscribe to my YouTube channel under my name, Lee Wolak. Again, I want to thank you for joining me in the Agape community as we learn how to better self-love through conscious living.